everyone. You're listening to Alternative Revelations with Linda Emmanuel. You're listening to podcast number 8. We're moving right along. I've got to interrupt here. I've got to get this disclaimer in here saying that I am not a doctor, nor am I a practitioner. I cannot give medical advice. I am just a researcher who searches for the truth and reveals the truth to others. So again, this podcast is for informational purposes only. If you need medical advice, talk to a licensed practitioner or your doctor. So let's get started. This podcast, I'm going to cover some other protocols that kill mycoplasma. These are also plant-based protocols, and they can be grown right in your own backyard. I'm going to also remind you that what kills mycoplasma in plants are nitrogen-based phytochemicals and sulfur. And the plants that I'm going to talk about today are in the same family, and they both kill mycoplasma, and they are both loaded with alkaloids. Now, one is grown in arid or warmer temperature, and the other one, where I live in St. Louis, we can grow this ground cover for our own medicinal purposes. I've also mentioned that lots of times I discover plants by investigating another plant and the family that that plant is in. And both these plants are definitely in the same family, and they share alkaloids. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is called Oleander, and it has been used medicinally for over 3,500 years, and it is even mentioned in the Bible as the desert rose. Now I'm going to interrupt with a story, but before I tell this story, I've also got to mention that the word cured, there's no such thing as the word cured. You may think there's a cure for cancer, but there is not. Cancer and disease are infections, and you can get well, and then you can get reinfected. I'm going to get off my soapbox, and now I'm going to tell you how oleander was discovered and brought to the attention of the world. In 1966, a doctor by the name of Ozel, O-Z-E-L, was visiting a small village in Turkey. He noticed that the inhabitants of this village did not seem to be sick like in other villages, and he was curious, so he asked why, and he found out that these villagers had been using an ancient folk medicine that was used for over 2,000 years, and it was the oleander plant, which is known as the desert rose in the Bible. So, being curious, he took the formula and he began producing his own medicinal, and he called it Anverzel, and he has been using this formula for over 40 years to treat cancer and other diseases. But unfortunately, his product is only available outside of the United States. Now this is where Dr. Ozel made his mistake. He claimed his treatment cured cancer, and that kept it from being FDA approved, which would have made it available in the U.S. Now, according to sources, Dr. Ozel's remedy reverses AIDS, arthritis, psoriasis, hepatitis C, and diabetes. And for your information, these are all, well, except for hepatitis C, these are all mycoplasma infections. Now, his product did pass the FDA phase 1 trial, but because of the expense, no further attempts to get it approved for use in the U.S. were made. Surprisingly, it is available in the United States under a different name and manufactured by a different company. Sold as a supplement and not as a drug, The name of the supplement in capsules is called Utopia Natural Rose Laurel OPC Plus, and it is available on www.utopiasilver.com. For your information, I am not endorsing this product. I have not tried this product, nor am I receiving any financial compensation for mentioning this product in my podcast. So let's get into why Oleander is so anti-cancer, anti-disease. And when I investigate a plant for its medicinal value, I usually go to a plant database where all the phytochemicals are listed. Now, it's only as good, or the listing is only as good as the research that has been done on this plant, and not very much research was done on oleander in the past. I don't know about the present, but I only found one alkaloid, and that was frustrating because I knew it had to have many more to be this potent against mycoplasma. Trying to find more alkaloids in the family of oleander, that's when I started researching the family of oleander. And that's when I discovered a plant that was growing right in my own backyard. And this plant was researched and was, well, about 50 alkaloids were listed. This was an amazing plant. So what this told me was that the oleander is packed with alkaloids, but they have not yet been discovered by scientists. In other words, the research has not been done. Now there's another interesting fact about oleander. Oleander is loaded with long-chain polysaccharides. That is the key here, polysaccharides. And if you remember from the second episode about mycoplasma, mycoplasma is cell wall deficient. It is in a membrane, encased in a membrane, and this membrane is made of a lipid and a polysaccharide. That is the key here to remember, the polysaccharide. It's funny how scientists are stuck on these long-chain polysaccharides, which affect the heart. But it is not the polysaccharides that are medicinal. Polysaccharides are just CHO, and if you listen, you'll hear the word saccharide, and this is the key. Saccharide is sugar. And if you remember from the second podcast, mycoplasma definitely goes after sugar. Like a fish goes after a worm. Again, mycoplasma needs long-chain polysaccharides to replicate its cell membrane. Now I'm going to reveal this amazing plant with over 50 alkaloids. But before that, a little bit of a story. My belief is that if you turn your life over to serving God, that God will lead you. And I really do think that God led me down the path to discover this plant and its medicinal value, because before this, people did not know about this plant, that it can be grown in our backyard as a ground cover. It is very easy to grow, very hardy in winter and hot summers, as in St. Louis. We go from cold to hot. It is very hard to kill it. If you cut it and bury it, bacteria cannot break it down right away. It takes a long time for this plant to break down. And the name of the plant is Vinca Minor. It's also known as periwinkle, and it's also known as myrtle, and it should not be confused with the flower that is known as periwinkle. That's a whole different variety, and I do not believe that flower has medicinal properties. If you live in the Midwest or the East Coast, you can grow this plant. It might take a year or two to establish, but it is worth having in your yard. And it is also a beautiful little ground cover that has a purple flower on it in the spring. When I searched Vinca Minor in the plant database, I came across at least 50 alkaloids in the leaves and the stems and the root. It is one of the top 5 plants in the plant kingdom with the highest concentration of alkaloids. In all probability, like Oleander, the Vinca Minor plant is poisonous if ingested, but alkaloids can be extracted from Vinca Minor stems and leaves through decoction, and I mentioned decoction in ACIAC tea. So again, if you remember that Vinca Minor and Oleander have long chain polysaccharides. They have sugar, which attract the mycoplasma. And while they're uptaking the polysaccharides, they're also uptaking these alkaloids, just as in the cyanogenic glycoside episode, where the mycoplasma is fooled into taking up the sugar and a cyanide, a hydrogen cyanide, is released. So Mother Nature is so clever to have put long chain polysaccharides with alkaloids. It is amazing. These two plants are amazing, just like apricot kernels that contain amygdalin, which consists of 2 molecules of glucose and 1 molecule of hydrogen cyanide. Before I get into the protocol, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. I'd say about 14 years ago, I heard of a man named Jim Humble. And Jim Humble was an engineer, and he did a lot of work down in South America. And South America was experiencing a lot of malaria. And he discovered a way to kill the malaria bacteria. And it was the formula was ClO2, which is chlorine and 2 oxygens. So if you remember from the mycoplasma, that mycoplasma dies in the presence of oxygen, well, so does this malaria bacteria. And Jim figured out, because he must have had a chemistry background, he figured out how to separate the chlorine and the oxygen. And he gave it to these natives, or these people down in South America, and they started getting well from malaria. And it was spreading. The information or the news was spreading. And then the pharmaceuticals got wind of it, and they ran him out of South America. Then he brought the ClO2 back to America, and he never made a dime off of this. And he shared it with people, and he told them how to make it. And people started selling it. And people started getting over glaucoma and cancers and disease, and the news spread like wildfire. Then the pharmaceuticals stepped in, and the FDA, who is a strong arm of the pharmaceuticals, persecuted him. And he had to leave America and set up in Mexico. But a lot of people who sell MMS, they're being put in jail. So you're asking, why am I bringing this up? I don't want to be another Jim Humble, and since this is my protocol that I created, I don't want to risk being shut down by the FDA. There are other protocols out there. It is also in my book, Alternative Revelations, which is on Amazon. And you're probably thinking, oh, I want to sell books, but I have been in this since 2003 and haven't made any of the money back that I've put in to my website and all kinds of different expenses. So it's not about the money that I'm trying to sell my book. It's not important. It's about serving God, serving people. When you serve God, you serve people. And it's too important to jeopardize my website or my podcast just because of a protocol. I apologize. So this ends episode 8, Plant-Based Protocols That Kill Mycoplasma. And before I come to a conclusion, I would like to stop and make a point. If you've been listening to these podcasts, you are probably very much awake. You are probably very much aware of what is going on. And I'd like to say that truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is highly criticized. The second stage, it is violently opposed. And third, it is finally accepted as the truth. Now you'll find that if you tell people about this information, you might run across the same thing I did. People criticized me. People made fun of me. My own family laughed at me in my face. Now, in 2019, people are starting to wake up. It is an amazing time to be alive. And I'd like to just read you this quote by a really famous person who I think is famous. He's passed. His name was Yuris Message. And he was a defector from communist Russia. He was actually a KGB agent. And he escaped the communist regime and came to America. And G. Edward Griffith was the interviewer in a series of YouTubes where he was warning America about communism. And yes, we are really close to getting into communism. I really try to drum this in that we could lose our freedom, our medical freedom, and the right to live. So this is what Yuris said about people in America. And please try to get this information out, and do not be discouraged if you come across people who do not believe you, because these people are demoralized. And the following is what Yuris describes as demoralized people, which has happened in America. And I quote, "They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their minds, even if you expose them to authentic information. Even if you prove that white is white and black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception and the logic, our behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible." Also, Yuris said there are 3 stages to a country becoming communist. And what the communists do when they infiltrate a country, they first demoralize the people. In other words, brainwash them. The second stage is destabilizing the country. And the third phase is chaos. Order out of chaos. So if you care about what's going on in America, get the word out. Even if people who are demoralized don't believe you, don't be discouraged. People need to wake up to what is happening. And you can watch his videos on YouTube, Yuris Message, YURIBEZMENOV. So this wraps up episode 8. Now the next protocol I'll be talking about in podcast 9 is a really good one. These plants contain berberine, which is a really potent killer against mycoplasma and Lyme disease and viruses. So until next time, good night and God bless.